G'day, my name is Brent. I'm the Greens candidate for Cogra, and today I want to talk a little bit about the political landscape, the difference between left and right. Talking to young people these days, it seems like there's a real apathy with the political process, that all politicians are the same. They say, oh, Liberal and Labor, they're all the same. When, to me, that just demonstrates that there's a bit of a misunderstanding there about the ideologies, about what drives these different political parties, in particular the left and the right-hand side of politics. So when we're talking about the left, we generally mean the progressive side of politics. If we're talking about the right, we mean the conservative side of politics. And if we break it down into terms of ideology, it really comes down to the size of government, the amount of government involvement in your day-to-day running of your society. On the left-hand side, on the left wing, we're basically looking for all of fundamental utilities and services to be in some way controlled and state-operated, to be run by the government. Now, this results obviously in slightly higher taxes, some would say, but the benefit to that is that then the cost of things like education, healthcare, electricity, water, gas, things like this is kept lower because it's controlled by the state. So it's not necessarily run for profit. It's run for quality of service by the government for its constituents. If we look at the right-hand side of politics, basically they're keen for privatisation. They want small government. They want less government involvement in day-to-day running of the community. So things like your water, your gas, your electricity, they'd rather see them operated by private companies, by other companies, rather than being owned and operated by the government. Now, they kind of spin this in a number of different ways. They try to tell you that, oh, it will result in lower taxes. That's not necessarily true. They might tell you that it's going to then run that particular thing more efficiently, which will result in lower prices. That may be true in an area where privatisation of the asset is in an area where there's competition. But in the case of our poles and wires, which is what Mike Baird's been talking about, it's going to result in a duopoly. And when that happens, prices can skyrocket because ultimately they're beholden to nobody. So instead of having to answer to the government or to the voting public, they're just answering to their shareholders, who will dictate that more profit please, and we're the ones who end up paying the bills. So that's pretty much the key difference between the left and the right. And if we're looking at the political landscape today, you've pretty much got the Liberal Party of New South Wales and the far right, who are keen for quite a bit of privatisation, and they'll often sell this in another way of talking in terms of revenue coming in and recycling assets, things like this. Now, if we take the case of our poles and wires, for example, they sell that off. The income that we get from the sale of those poles and wires, we get in a lump sum now this coming year. But the thing is, we would have made that income over the next 7 years anyway. And then at the end of that 7-year period, we'd still own the asset. So we'd still be generating an income. So it's a real false economy, this idea of selling off assets that are actually generating an income for the government. But that's the key here, is it's the long-term game that they're playing, is they want to see all of the assets that are owned by the government that generate income sold off, because that means that the government will have less income long-term, which means that they will have less power to be involved in our lives. And it puts them on the back foot. So you look at South Australia, they sold off their poles and wires. They're never going to be able to buy it back. That opportunity is gone because they're no longer getting the revenue from it to actually then put towards buying it back. The same thing will happen here in New South Wales. So if you care about things like lower cost for your healthcare, for your education, for your utilities, it makes sense actually to be a lefty because the left side of politics, the Labor Party back in its day in the 70s and the 80s, the Greens, have all brought incredible results to our community to engender equality for people in our community. The right-hand side of politics, at the end of the day, is pretty greedy, and it only really benefits people who are millionaires. So if you're not a millionaire, it really makes sense to be voting Green at the coming election.